Yes.
Okay.
The second round on the...
Sorry, can I repeat the timing with our phones?
Yeah, you can, I keep and you can have one just to...
Ok, allora, stiamo ok, pronto ce l'avete voi un telefono per monitorare il tempo? Ok,
magari io sicuramente solo di tenere il volume spento così sentiamo
solo la campagna.
No, bello. In teoria, ma questa qui appena selezione. Dopo tra 5 minuti.
I just ask you to tell me, my speech will start in
Okay.
so
Yes.
okay, we are discussing this, the following motion. The use of private cars by a single driver with no passengers should be forbidden in city centers. I give floor to Francesco.
I will start in 3, 2, 1. Good morning everyone, my name is Montagna Francesco and I'm the first speaker of the proposition team. First of all, I would like to start by saying that for me it's a pleasure to be here to discuss this stimulating statement with all of you. We are the proposition team, so with our speech we are going to support this statement. We are going to prove you that the use of private cars by a single driver with no passengers must be forbidden in city centers. I would like, for our team it's crucial to make you understand very well what we are going to talk about. In order to do this, I would like to give you the definitions of the key words of the statement. First of all, what we refer to when we talk about private cars without passengers. We know that cars can be private and can be shared. And when we talk about private cars without passengers, we refer to cars owned by individuals that use this means so as to consider only his private needs, So we're not talking about private cars owned by family that are used, for example, also for children or for parents. We're talking about a private car that is used only by a singular driver without passengers that could use also other means of transport, for example, could share other means of transport so as to arrive in the different places. Moreover, what are city centers? The city center is a core of a city and is characterized by an enormous number of people on foot and is characterized also by narrow streets where few cars can circulate and this can be very dangerous. And we know that you can think that probably these streets can be widened. However, these streets can't be widened due to they are in the city centers, and we know that there can be such transformation in the city centers so as to conserve the historical houses, historical monuments. So now I'd like to explain our team line. I'm the first speaker. I will deal with the first point connected with the important key value of sustainability. Sustainability based on environmental sustainability that is based on the concept that we can't accept, moreover, the pollution, both environment pollution and acoustic pollution. And on the other hand, the second speaker of my team, Maria, will focus on the efficiency and security of city centers. So our three key values of our team line are sustainability, efficiency and security in city centers. So now let's focus on the first point. Traffic is one of the primary causes of environmental pollution. Global pollution is a global crisis and its consequences are terrible. We can, for example, consider the rising sea levels. For example, a lot of communities that live on the coast have to dislocate, have to leave their houses due to rising sea levels. Or we can talk about loss of agricultural productivity, global warming, melting ice caps, or for example, other extreme weather events. People are suffering and we can't consider anymore our needs. Traffic is the primary cause for this terrible situation. Due to the improvement of traffic, of course, has as a consequence the improvement of carbon dioxide emissions that are terrible for the problem of global warming. So we have to consider this problem, and as a consequence, it's easy to understand that we have to reduce traffic. We have to reduce that cars that circulate in city centers. So we can't accept that person without passengers drives only his cars. We have to consider another more sustainable solution. So the car sharing. In fact, we know that. Let's think if everyone uses his private cars without passengers. We improve traffic. We improve the emissions of carbon dioxide, and we improve also the global warming, and people continue to suffer. On the other hand, people must share their means of transport so as to optimize the consumption of carbon fuels and as a consequence the emissions, the production of carbon dioxide. So it's important to understand that the use of private cars by a single driver is dangerous for everyone, and so as a consequence the use of private cars driven by a singular person without passenger must be forbidden, especially in the city centers. In fact, for example, if we consider this approach is, we can say, egoistic, terrible and nonsensical. Car sharing is the best solution. We can reduce in this way emission of carbon dioxide, and we can maintain a sustainable carbon footprint. And this is the most important aim that our society must consider. In fact, the the improvement of traffic, it's a big problem in general, not just for the global warming, but also for the polluter. For example, we can, if we consider statistics of the most important city centers, such as Milan, Turin, we have in these places high presence of respiratory disease and also cancers. Statistics prove that lung cancer is higher in these cities, and traffic is the primary cause for all these problems. So if there is a solution that can avoid this terrible problem, we of course must consider it. Now I'd like to continue by considering another form of pollution, because my first point is based on sustainability. So I proved to you that the statement is very important so as to reduce pollution in general. Environmental pollution, air pollution of course, and also acoustic pollution. We have to try reduce the hustle and bustle of the cities. This motion is based on a particular place, city centers. And the city centers are characterized by by schools, by libraries, houses, and other places where people need tranquility. So it's important to consider another value, respect toward other people. People who want to study, people who want to work, people who just want to rest in a public space or enjoy themselves. So also, for example, respect towards ancient. So if there is a solution that we can apply so as to reduce the traffic, of course we have to consider. As a consequence, it's important to understand that the fact that a holy person drives his cars without passengers is dangerous for everyone, for environment, for our body, and also for the we can say for the respect towards everyone. We know that city centers are characterized by also ancient people who want to rest, who needs tranquility, and the improvement of traffic due to the fact that a single person drives his own cars improve also acoustic pollution. So as a consequence, I would like to conclude by saying that for our team, the use of private cars by a single driver with no passengers must be forbidden. Due to, as a consequence, if we consider this approach, we will have an improvement of traffic, so an improvement of an environment, of pollution in the air, of environmental problems, and as a consequence also acoustical pollution. This is the end of my speech. I hope I've been clear in my explanation.
Thank you very much. Your speech lasted 7 minutes and 57 seconds. Okay, if Gary is ready.
So before I start off my argumentation, I would like to confirm what some of the other teammates said. First thing, I would like to redefine some of the key terms of the motion. The first is private cars. We define private cars as cars that are bought and used by single individuals, both for their private use and for possible economic labors, and they are not used by companies, these cars. And then we define the city centers as they're not. It's not really a definition. It's just, city centers are not usually, not always with narrow streets, and they're not always the historic part of the city. So that's one thing. Okay, now on to the computation. So the opposing team has said that with more traffic in the city centers, there is more CO2 emission, and so we should ban single people driving car by the city centers because we should reduce traffic. But this is not really the case, because I will explain better later. When you deviate the flow of traffic from one side of the town, that will inevitably go to the other side of the town. So the pollution really is the same, is moved to another side of the town, but it's still there because the car will still be there. We're not banning the car from moving at all. We're limiting where the car can move. So that would only it would just stay the same. The CO2 emission will stay the same, and so the same goes with carpools. There will still be cars on the street with fossil fuel, and that's also why we will explain this later. Also, that ZTLs, so limited traffic zones, are a better way to help the environment. And we, as the opposition team, we stand for the best possible outcome for the cities, the livability of the cities, and for the environment. I will explain. Then about the acoustic pollution that they talked about, as it is important in the city centers, they see that themselves is really busy. There are so many ways in which that could be acoustic pollution, and cars is only one of the many. So it could potentially definitely reduce a little bit, but there's not really a solving of the issues because there's still a lot of acoustic pollution, and as we said, we limit the traffic only in one zone. So eventually that acoustic pollution would move to the other side of the town, and so it will affect even a bigger side of the city. Okay, I will now move on to explain to you the, yes?
And don't you think that we should start from something? Also little actions, actions can do the difference.
Yes, sure, but you also have to consider about the other side of the town, the majority of the town as well. You are kind of in some way giving a privilege to the center of the city as opposed to the entirety of the city that also would be affected by this limitation of traffic. So, as I was saying, now our team, like we said, and I said before, we stand for the best possible outcome for the city's liability and the environment, and we will support that through three argumentations. So as the first speaker, I would explain to you how this regulation would not be affected. And then the second speaker, Francesco, will explain to you that it's not possible to adequately enforce this regulation and how there would be a monopoly of the multinational in sectors of taxis. And then our third speaker, Leonardo, will further expand our argumentation and bring more examples to sustain it. And then, okay, so why would this regulation not be effective? So, as we said, there are three clear points in this. So, first thing first, we say the streets. When we are putting this regulation in, we are only limiting the traffic flow in one side of the city, the city center. So there's one side of the city where there's no traffic. Okay, and then on the environmental point of view, there would be even worse, because if I am driving a car and I have to go into the city center because it's the shortest road, if you block me, I'm going to have to reroute my journey, and I will have to take a longer road. So I will have to do a much longer route, and I will consume more fossil fuel to drive the car to that longer route. So that will
Yeah.
yes.
So I don't think the point is to substitute the car transport with another type of transport instead of just doing more streets.
Yes, but usually the car transport is one of the most comfortable one and one of the what people use the most. Public transport, for example, sometimes they're not. You cannot rely sometimes because they're not 100% reliable on. Sometimes the bus is late, or sometimes there's some congregation on the road and you cannot take the bus. And how are you going to do it then? You have to take the car. And if you take the car in this situation, this scenario, you would, in the long run, end up with only polluting more the air, because if I take a longer route, I have to use more of the fossil fuel that's driving the car to go there. And also, that's why we believe, as said before, that in this type of scenario, maybe a limited traffic, the zone traffic, like it already exists in so many towns in Italy and in the other part of the world, would be a better and more efficient way, because with ZTLs, if I'm only limiting the flow of the cars to electric cars in the city centers, that would help with the pollution of the air, and usually electric cars are even quieter, so they would also help with the acoustic pollution, and it would allow cars driven by one single individual to enter the city centers. And then another thing, on the traffic point of view, the actual traffic in the street, if we limit the traffic flow to that one zone and then we reroute the cars, that amount of cars that was first in the limited zone would have to go into another zone. And so that would only create even more traffic on the other side of the road where the cars have to go, because we said they have to reroute their route because they cannot be in the town centers. So that would bring many problems in both in the environmental situation and the traffic situation in itself, because again, longer routes, I have to take a longer route, so I emit more CO2 because I have to use more fossil fuels, and then I have to reroute, so that means that, and so do the other people that are in the cars. One alone person, they have to go and drive to another street, and that street has all the other cars that usually flow to that street, and so that's more cars to one road that's already busy in itself. And then we said ZTLs in this scenario would be more efficient for the pollution and for the acoustic, for the liability of the people, because if I live by myself, I have one car and it's an electric car, I could not possibly drive into the city centers, even if I have to go there because I have to work there, for example, or I have to do something in there. With the ZTL, I can go there and I can do what it is that I need to do. And that's why we believe that this regulation will not be effective. And with that, I conclude my speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The speech lasted 7 minutes. Second. Yeah, you can go and start your speech.
Okay, I will start in 3, 2, 1. Good morning everyone, I'm Federica and I'm the second speaker of my team. Before starting with the central part of my speech, I'd like to confuse some of the things said by the opposition team. You said that the motion that one has to not let single drivers drive a car alone doesn't actually prevent from pollution because you just move one car to the other, while we said a traffic limited zone actually limited pollution. We think that it's actually the contrary. Traffic limited zone don't limit pollution, because in that case you move the car from the centers to another part of the cities, but while you forbidden a single driver to drive a car, then you prevent anyway single individuals to buy a car, maybe if not strictly necessary. So if an individual knows that he cannot drive a car alone in the city, maybe he avoids also to buy the car if it's not strictly necessary. Also, you talked about electric car as a solution for pollution, but it actually is not true, because if you think about cars' batteries, how do you actually dispose of them? That's a problem. So electric cars aren't so environmentally friendly as you drawn them. And another thing that I'd like to say, listening to your speech, it's like you don't consider another kind of transport apart from cars. You said that public transport are unreliable, and I will discuss that later, but in general, cars even isn't the more the only way to transport from a part to the other. So I don't see why don't you actually understand that and so see another point of view. So after saying that, I'd like to continue with my central part of my speech and so present to you the second and the third argumentation. As Francesco said, our team line is based on 3 values, and he talked about responsibility. So I will deal with efficiency and security. We think that these values are something that are the basis of our society, so it is important to sustain them and not them let go. About the efficiency, obviously it's important we want to assure every citizen a dignified style of life. Because we think that it's not fair that maybe people living on a city, a big city, aren't as safe as people, for example, living on a countryside, because maybe risk to traffic, the streets aren't safe as in the countryside. We don't think that it's fair that moms they want to let their children go to the park can do it in big cities because it is not fair, because maybe the streets aren't fair. We propose a world where all these injustice, because if we can call them like this, will be resolved. We also proposed a world where a single cannot actually use a car alone with causing a huge emissions just because doesn't want to sacrifice himself in order to give benefits for a whole community. So we propose a world where car sharing, public transports, where cars maybe can be substituted by other type of transports, for example bikes. If you think about it, if you have to move in your own city, you don't need a car, but also a bike could be helpful. The opposition team might say that maybe one person cannot find, not a family, so cannot actually find someone who goes to work with him in order to use the same car and use this car sharing. But let's compare these two situations. Compare a situation where the individual drives a car alone, causing a huge amount of carbon emissions. And compare this with another situation where maybe 2 friends that actually don't do the same job, so they have to go to 2 different parts of a city, decided to leave their home maybe 20-30 minutes earlier, but reducing drastically the emissions of carbon emissions. So we think that car sharing is a really solution, a really reliable alternative to just driving cars alone, because we don't want to do little sacrifice in order to have benefits for the entire community. Obviously, you named before the public transports aren't reliable, but we actually don't agree with that. You said that public transport could have complications, yes, but at the same time also cars could cause complications. For example, if there is too much traffic. If there is too much traffic, you also risk to arrive late to work, as you risk to go late to work if you use public transports. So I don't actually see the point in this observation. And anyway, public transports are enough reliable. We think big cities like Rome, for example, Los Angeles, New York, Vienna, all these cities are built and have their core in public transports because they are important and essential in order to let the people use their city and arrive to the place of the city they want to go, even without their car. And last but not least, we like to talk about the solution of using bikes instead of cars. So anyway, transports that are more sustainable and connected to the value that Francesco proposed than cars. The most famous city that has used this system is Amsterdam, for example. When you go to Amsterdam, you see a lot of bikes. Citizens learned to use bike instead of using cars. Obviously, there was an investment on that. But this investment gets seized on the future and not just on our needs of the present. But saying that, I'd like to move with the third argumentation that is connected to the value of security. As I said before, we aim to live in a world where big cities are as safe as countryside are, and so we want to have, for example, the cities where there is not too much traffic that cause a lot of damage. And this traffic can be avoided if we forbid a single person to drive car alone. So if we do this, we limit traffic, and this have a better, good influences, consequences on everyday lives. Let's think, for example, about ambulances that cannot reach hospital in time. Let's think about policy that cannot arrive in crime scenes, or about firefighters that cannot put out fires on time. These are critical situations that sometimes are put at risk by the traffic, so by the presence of too much car that maybe sometimes are used with no sense. So this we as the proposition team think that single drivers should be forbidden to single drivers to drive their car alone, because they have, as I explained, a lot of bad consequences, and also because we have better alternatives that allow us to have a more dignitous and better style kind of life. Thank you. That's the end of my speech.
Thank you very much. Your speech must be 7 minutes and 34 seconds. Okay. Francesco is ready.
Yeah, just 1 second. Okay, well, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Okay. I'm Francesco, and I'll be the second speaker for opposition team. Well, let me start my speech by refuting some of the arguments that the other team has brought. Well, first of all, I will start by refuting their main argument, the fact that people need to be in some ways respected, people that are in the city centers. However, we must say that all the problems that they are trying to solve with their regulations are actually not going to be solved, because first of all, let's start by their reason about car sharing. Well, they have said that they should promote car sharing, that two friends might go together in order to save, to avoid environmental costs of being on single cars, to avoid acoustic problems. But the problem is that they fail to acknowledge that these people, as I will explain to you in the second argumentation, will also be impacted by your laws. And first of all, let us remember that we define private cars as cars that are owned and used by individuals either for their personal purposes or for purposes of economic advantage. And okay, so well, now let me keep saying that since they have not given a clear definition of what a car sharing is by definition something that is implemented by a company. How many times in cities like Milan, in cities like Turin, we see services of car sharing that are offered by some companies, by some corporations, and these are not private cars. These are defined as company cars, as we will explain further, because it will be useful also for a third argumentation. So their reasoning does not apply for private cars. These cars would also, the ones they say, will also be badly impacted by their regulations. So there's no, well, let me continue by saying that when they talk about private cars and about the problems of disposing the batteries of private cars, there is a clear thing to say. While some carbon cars maybe are not that environmentally expensive to produce, in the end they will start polluting as soon as they move. So their pollution will be more exponential than electric cars that may be more environmentally challenging to produce and dispose of. However, they pollute much less while they are actually being used. In fact, green cars, the environment, the electric cars actually do not pollute at all when moving, and that's what we really want. In the city center, only these types of cars will be able to circulate, so there will be no environmental costs for the citizens, and this is talking about respect of the citizens. And also, when you said that other means of transport like bikes could be used, well, actually, we must remember that for the same thing about respect of the citizens that you say, you must remember that bikes are one of the most important problems, of the greatest problems for pedestrians themselves, people that go on foot. How many times we hear in big cities like Milan, in Turin, and also in Amsterdam, cases of people that were not careful enough to drive their bikes or their electric, let's say, not their cars, their bikes or their electric bikes, and yes.
Sorry, but the risk is also when you drive a car.
There is virtually less risk when you drive a car, because when you drive a car, cars, they have a precise lane where they have to go. In many cities, cities are not still adapted to lanes, specific lanes for bikes and other little means of transport. So some inaccurate drivers of these bikes can go on sidewalks. They can go in conflict with the route that pedestrians take, whereas cars are just on roads, on cement roads. So this is a very important thing to say. And this is what really makes a pedestrian more, let's say, endangered in the streets. No, thank you. Okay, so let's now just move on to our other arguments. Okay, and also about saying the emergency vehicles that you say that might be also affected by more traffic. Well, let's remember that emergency vehicle, by law, other cars are required to make enough space for the vehicles to pass. So even if there are cars in the city center, they will still have no problem to circulate. Okay, so now let's move on to the second argumentation. It is not possible to adequately enforce these regulations. Okay, first of all, let us remember that there is no way of legally adequately certifying if a person is alone or not. Because, for example, when you enter a city center, you might use the excuse in controls to say, okay, I'm just going to grab someone from the city center so that we will be in two in the car. So right now I'm in one, and then I will be in two. And also, the same thing may apply for when you get out. For example, when you get out, if you get caught that you are just one in the car, and you might use the excuse, okay, I was just going to leave someone in the city center and then I went away on my own. But the problem is that these people might also pretend that there is no way of legally certifying if this person is saying the truth or not. And the problem also goes, if you decide that this is not a valid excuse to be in the city center, the problem is, how about the people that are really in this situation? How about the people that are really going into the city center to take someone, or are going to the city center to leave someone and then go away just alone? So then now, so this, the impact is going to be tremendous about many people that maybe have to collect friends, as you said, that maybe have to leave their relatives and other people in the city center and then have to go away. And this is virtually a high percentage of car drivers. So the impact is going to be tremendous. And also for the first argument, let me rebuild my first argument. We create, we promote ZTLs because in this way there is virtually no pollution in the city center. As you say, even if they are the most inhabited centers with a lot of pedestrians, a lot of people that go on foot. With these ZTLs, we really take away the core problem of environmental pollution in city centers that also affects, as you said, the health of the pedestrians in the cities. Okay, so then let us go to the third argument. There will be a monopoly of multinationals in the sectors of taxis and car sharing. The problem is that, as we have said before, when we talk about individual cars, private cars, the problem is that, as we have said, the individual, as long as his car is his car, so entrusted to him, the problem is that he can use it for virtually whatever he wants. For example, he can use it for personal purposes, or maybe he might use this just to go for financial benefits. So in the end, he might become a freelance taxi driver or something like that. However, let's remember that if this is the definition of private cars, the motion itself forbids these people to get this advantage. So think about all those freelance taxi drivers that now exist, especially in big cities. What would be their fate? Well, their fate would be that they will simply lose their job, and of course, also there is another problem. There will be a monopoly of other companies. For example, if you're not banning some company-owned cars, for example, I'm thinking about Uber, I'm thinking about other services of car sharing, if they are not forbidden from going into the city centers, they will be the only ones that will virtually possibly do these things, such as being taxis or being car sharing companies. So they will virtually have a monopoly. So what the monopoly means? The monopoly means that they can virtually do whatever they want in the market because there is there's no one contrasting them or proposing better deals and better offers for the consumers. So this is a very big problem, especially in the most populous cities. I'm thinking about Rome, I'm thinking about Milan, where there are millions of people, thousands of people and tourists that take taxis every day, and also a huge number, hundreds if not thousands, of freelance taxi drivers and other people that work in this sector independently. So we would, by imposing these regulations, we would negatively impact virtually every single person that your resolutions are trying to resolve. We would impact the pedestrians for the reasons that we said before. We would impact also other people, the drivers themselves, and we would also badly impact people who use their private cars for their living, in order to make a living. So in the end, that is why, for these reasons, we are proudly members of opposition team, and we have never been so proud to oppose. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Your speech was 7 minutes 59 seconds.
Which will start in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am Francesco Montevero and I am the first speaker of the proposition team. As my role provides, I would like to explain why our team line was definitely better than the opposition team line, and I would like to respond to some argumentation of the opposition team. So first of all, the opposition team said that the traffic would flow in other parts of the city, and this will not cause any difference. Although we do not agree with this, because in the first part there's the emergency situation. You know, if there's, for example, an emergency in the city center and there is a lot of traffic, we need clear space for EMS vehicles to move, and we explained it firmly. We explained this because emergency can happen everywhere in town, and that we need a fast response from paramedics, for example. Think about a heart attack. It is really dramatic, and we need a fast response. Or, for example, a fire that is destroying a house. In fact, as we said before, inside the core of a city, there are many historical buildings that need to be preserved, and also places where elderly people live. So we need yeah, come.
Aren't you aware that for the reason that you said, as we have said before, the other vehicles have the duty legally to make space in every way possible for EMS also right now, so they are also not impacted. And if the streets are narrow enough, then it's a problem that the EMS vehicle is too big, so the problem will be there anyways. Aren't you aware of that?
Well, I don't think the problem is about the emergency vehicles, because in major towns of Italy, for example, think about Rome. There are cities where you can't just destroy buildings and create more lanes, but you can't even make emergency vehicles smaller. So we need to improve the traffic in those areas. And if we just make, for example, one person drive, that will cause more person per car. So an interactive flow of cars into the city center. So there would be still a problem. And we thought about also a fire situation where there is a fire inside the core of the city. And that's a big problem if it is not solved enough, because many people can die, and the fire needs to be extinguished as soon as possible. So another point we disagree is that bikes actually, also as other way of transports, should have their lanes to move in, and they should have, and in many cities those lanes are present, and it's a problem of the driver of the ones of the person who is driving the bike or the electric scooter to stay in the lane where it's supposed to be and not be, for example, on crossroads or where it shouldn't be, where the circulation should be free. Another thing is that car sharing, we intended it as a person with a private person who, for money, puts their car and gets to the point where the other person wants to go. So I would repeat firmly that our team line was based on three concepts that we need to understand clearly. It is sustainability. It means that we can reduce traffic pollutions. Don't imagine your small town, but imagine, for example, Los Angeles, where people get stuck in traffic for 3, 4, 5 hours consecutively. And in these cities, in those cities, there are big lanes. There aren't like narrow streets like in Rome or in other small towns that are present in southern Italy. And if we just reduce, for example, the person that are driving a car, and we just put more people in the same vehicle, that can be also a car or for example, a public transport. That can be a bus or a metro. We can have half people driving their cars. So this would be more efficient. As we also said that another key word is efficiency. Efficiency is what can make us live in a better city. In a city where we all can breathe clean air. We all can arrive in less time to the point where we want to arrive. But the also important point is about security. So we said that an accident can happen everywhere in town. We said that we should have a really small amount of time in order to reach our destination, and every EMS should arrive in time. So we have to mix up all these things in order to live in a city where we can help each other. For example, we can help those in needs. Those cars who, for example, transport a disabled person and needs a larger space. And we should have the priority for those cars that are transporting, in fact, people with a bigger necessity than us. It becomes also a moral help that we need to show to everyone. And for example, we talked about also about acoustic and environmental pollution. So acoustic pollution is caused majorly by cars circulating. If there are no works being done in the center of the city, for example, we know that apart from cars, there aren't other sources of big noises, apart from cars circulating, also at high velocity, that they rather than should be. And this is something really important we should note. So we believe in those three concepts that we said and repeated, which are efficiency, security, and sustainability. With this, I would like to conclude my speech, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. The speech was 7 minutes, 32 seconds. Yes.
in 3, 2, 1. Hello everyone, my name is Leonardo and I'm the third speaker of opposition team. Now, as is for my role, I need to point out the clashes of this debate and most importantly some computation against the opposition side or opposition side. The first clash, which regarded all about the first argument they brought, and our first argument regarded, of course, the pollution, the emission of CO2. Now, you have said that indeed by car sharing, by reducing traffic, by removing cars that only have one person in it, the driver, we would of course remove a large chunk of the traffic which is responsible for a lot of emission CO2. We need to understand our proposition what we have brought to the table. That is the CTL program. That indeed removes completely all cars that aren't completely electric, and then will completely remove all pollution in the city, because one count is the pollution that electric car production could make, although more than later because there was a POI, I believe, about the production of electric cars, but also the emission that actually it's in the city. Electric cars don't pollute in the city, but the production of said cars pollute in the factories, so at least the citizens wouldn't have the pollution on themselves. But more on that later. We also presented how indeed pollution, indeed we also said that pollution, use of pollution removed by car sharing. And I've heard many times about applications that indeed I have the option to car share with strangers, but personally I wouldn't. I believe many others wouldn't. I believe many will use car sharing functionalities, but especially in large cities we can't really we can't really assume that most of the citizens who indeed were driving a single car by alone themselves would use the single sharing car. I believe many will, I believe many more wouldn't. And as such, the problem wouldn't be fully fixed, and this is probably the biggest clash of the debate. Then there was about another clash about sound pollution. Indeed, that was also very important. Traffic in cities, again, to construction, but especially traffic, makes a lot of noise, and in the city center can be very annoying for the people in it. And you indeed presented that there were less cars inside it because more people would car share. Indeed, there would be indeed less sound, less honks, less pollution, of course. We still would say that not only we would only allow electric cars to be present inside the city center, and as such that's probably a third of the chunk of all vehicles around, meaning that indeed there will be less vehicles in the city center. But also, by presenting electric vehicles, we would understand that electric vehicles are fully silent. They still make a noise because they are vehicles, and often emulate a sound of a real vehicle to make standbys understand that a car is passing by, but that's still not noticeable compared to a full car, a normal car. Also, I can repeat, there will be less cars overall. Then there was a POI to first opposition speaker, two POIs actually, where you said, I believe, the first opposition speaker, that it would be better by starting little actions. But, as our first proposition speaker talked about, indeed, it wouldn't really be a small step, because we know that every step, a small step forward is a step forward in the right direction. In this case, it wouldn't be a step at all, it would be a side step. We just remove the problem. On top of this, there was yes?
Before you talked about the solution to remove all the pollution in the city, but we are talking about reality. Your solution is too much utopistic. How do you think that you can remove all the pollution in the city? All people should have an electric car, or should go with bikes, or other on foot?
I don't expect everyone to buy electric cars just because their local city or where they live you need a point city zone in their city center. But I expect all vehicles that actually are electric to go there. People can always use bikes or go by foot. That's the whole point of this. I don't believe it's very utopistic because many cities are actually implemented to this day. Then there was another POI, I believe, yes, to our second speaker. Our second speaker is to you actually. Talking about emergency vehicles, so I want to connect this because you talked about indeed how traffic would be removed from the city center, and as such emergency vehicles could move faster in it. Of course, that's really important to make sure emergency vehicles respond quickly to all emergencies, but we still need to point out that if the problem, just like the third proposition speaker talked about, is historical layout sites that a large city I suppose would have, like Rome, indeed we would see that there's no possible feasible way to remove those historical sites without actually causing harm to the history of the city. As such, the problem is not anymore private cars that are present in the city, with or without drivers, extra passengers, sorry, but the city's layout, so that's not really true. Then there was the talk about bikes. Indeed, there was a POI talking about how bikes could be a better choice, but then we pointed out how bikes could actually be dangerous. You pointed out back that bikes can be as dangerous as cars, because indeed you could be we pointed out this because indeed you can be hit as a pedestrian both by a car and a bike, but you in defense said that indeed there are bike lanes that make sure, just like cars that have their own lane, also bikes will have their own lane. Still, you need to remember that bike lanes don't always fully follow the road, and there will be spots where indeed the space between the road and the pedestrian side of the road would intersect with the bike lane, and that will lead to many more incidents and pedestrians getting hit by bike owners. Just as an example of Amsterdam. Then there was the third speaker proposition. Actually, we already said that. Then we can go back to the second PI, to our first proposition speaker in our last minute. Moving all electric cars to a longer route, because indeed we wouldn't be taking anymore the city center, would pollute more because it's a longer route. We need to remember though that while it would be indeed be a longer route, because if not, why would people take the city center? Still, people wouldn't have to deal with traffic anymore, due to the fact that electric cars would be removed from the pile of cars that can indeed pile up in external longer routes, since it would be all going to the city center. They have that one benefit, they now can be the city on its own, and as such they would prefer to go inside the city center. Other cars instead would go to longer routes, and they would pollute more instead of being moved from the city center, but they wouldn't have traffic anymore, because electric cars wouldn't be involved in the longer routes anymore. So, is it better to have traffic in a longer route or to have a moving longer route? Indeed, both would pollute, but a traffic in a longer route would lead to more stagnation on top of it being a longer route, as such even more pollution. This was my speech. Thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you very much. Seven and 50 seconds.
Okay, just one second. I'll
Yeah,
just sum up my speech.
no problem.
Oh, sorry. Okay. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Debaters and judges, we're finally reached the end of this debate, this very interesting debate in which I believe we have found many points in which the two sides have clashed. And I will, in my opinion, like the three main ones that clearly determine which side has won this debate. In this case, the opposition team. Well, the 3 points of clash that we're going to talk about today are, well, the respect for the people and their health, the emergency situations which might happen in city centers, and then the purpose of car sharing. Well, first of all, let us start with the respect for the people and their health. Well, they have said, first of all, that they are trying to enact their regulations to prevent too much acoustic damage, acoustic pollution. But then they controversially have said that they will let other cars, because it says it in the motion, they let other cars that are not by just one driver, but have maybe more people, so other maybe carbon fossil cars, to go freely in city centers. I mean, while there is still clearly a logical fallacies, we have explained that with only electric cars in the city centers, thanks to ZTLs, there will be less noise, because electric cars make no noise virtually in the city centers, because they have engines that are not rumorous. Then, ZTLs, they have accused us of ZTLs being utopistic, whereas we have explained to you that it is a reality nowadays. Many cities already have adopted these ZTLs, which can be big cities like Milan and Rome to small cities, so there is not utopistic. So there is also, they claim there is a physical harm for the people involved. So while we certainly agree that carbon fossil cars clearly are a problem for the health of the people, for the body of the people, we are saying that we do not solve this solution by, as they said, by imposing just a limit on the cars that can go if the cars have just one driver and no one else. We are saying that it clearly can eliminate the health problems related with the citizens by just preventing carbon fossil cars from going into the city centers, because the city centers themselves are the core centers of maybe more economic activity where there's more pedestrians, more people, so we will effectively prevent their harm. And then, last but not least, they said that maybe bikes can be used together with also other means of transport. However, they clearly failed to acknowledge, as we have said to you many times, that the bikes are actually more dangerous for the pedestrians themselves, the city center dwellers and inhabitants themselves, because many times cities are not programmed to have specific lanes for bikes, whereas cars are only allowed to circulate, of course, on cement roads that are clear and very distinct from sidewalks. So now that's why I clearly think that opposition team has clearly won this clash. Now let's move on to the emergency situations. We say that we also want to take away as many cars as possible from the city center, because maybe sometimes emergency centers may have a hard time reaching the persons in need, because they're being, as they say, slowed down nowadays by the cars, by the private cars. However, we have clearly stated that this is not a problem of private cars, this is a problem of cities' layouts, because right now, by law, we are already obligated to make space in every way possible to emergency services. And they have afterwards admitted themselves that this is a problem about the side of the streets and of the sides of the vehicles. So we have clearly won this point of flash. Then the purpose of car sharing, they said that at first it was between friends, and then they said it was just for economic purposes, as the third speaker has said. Well, this is clearly a logical fallacy. We say that car sharing is specifically something done by companies. And companies, the problem is that the car sharing done by freelance workers is going to be negatively impacted because of the reasons that we said before, because private cars cannot circulate anymore, so companies would have a monopoly on things like taxis and car sharing devices. So I want to end this debate with a question: are we really going to neglect the real problems that are involved in city mobility and not solve the real issues? Because let us remind, the world they picture is a world where there is still health-related issues for the citizens, risks for the respect and the integrity of the citizens themselves in the city centers, whereas we propose a world where ZTLs are able to prevent pollution, more pollution in the city centers, and we are trying to preserve the integrity and the respect of the citizens. So that's why I have never been so proud to oppose this. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. And 4 minutes, 16 seconds.
again, Maria, and it's a pleasure to be here to discuss with you this motion. It's been a really stimulating debate, and I'd like to say the main point of clashes that we seen during this debate. But first of all, I'd like to better understand, better you understand what was our team line and what was our purpose. Us, as the proposition team, had the burden to explain you why the use of private cars by a single driver should be banned, especially if the driver has no passengers in city centers. And we approved you that it's important that this should be banned for two reasons. First of all, to reduce the carbon emissions. Second, because we'll have a more efficient transport. And third, because we will have a safer city. And we connected all these 3 points with 3 values that we think are really important. So sustainability, efficiency, and security. We propose a world where you don't only focus on the present but on the future, and so you focus on carbon emissions, where we put society needs before individual ones, and so car sharing, where lives are safe and people are no longer left alone. The main point of clashes, and have been several actually during this debate. First of all, with the opposition team, we had different ideas about how to reduce pollution. Because we explained you that we reduce pollution if we forbid the drivers to drive alone their cars, because in this way they would use other kind of transport, like for example bikes, or just go on foot, or maybe using car sharing. While the opposition team said the solution is traffic limited zone with electric cars. We actually proved that electric cars are economic friendly, how they actually drove them, and anyway this doesn't help to reduce the traffic, because the amount of cars there are in the streets is the same. While that is a problem that we solved by forbidding drivers to drive alone. The second main point of clash is also about car sharing, because we meant car sharing, I think I also made it clear during my speech, we meant car sharing as privates who decide together to use the same car in order to have benefits to the society in general. But opposition talked about car sharing managed by companies. We obviously didn't talk about that, so I didn't actually see the point in view by saying that. And also I saw that during your speech you never actually considered other kind of transports apart from car. And while we proposed bikes, and you said bikes are dangerous, you're saying that if I get hit from a bike or from a car, it's more dangerous the bike? I don't think so. And anyway, there are specific streets for bikes also, not just for cars. So I didn't actually see your point. You said that with our solution, people would have to do more street, but it's not that the point. Because by forbidding people to drive alone, you let them find an alternative solution. In this case, using, for example, public transports or car sharing, not just making more streets in order just to use the same, always the car alone. And that's the end of my speech.
Thank you. Your speech lasted 3 minutes once. So you can clap your hands.